Tonight, there's a bill in the works that would eliminate the cap on how many charter schools could run here in Michigan. Right now, that number stands at 150. More than 10,000 students are waiting to get into one of these schools. But the question remains, which provides a better education, charter or public? Welcome back to Let Her Rip, and what some believe is history in the making. Tonight, we've got a liberal Democrat and a conservative Republican who are actually working together to increase the number of charter schools in Michigan. On the far left of your TV screen is activist, commentator, educator, pastor, Reverend Horace Sheffield. On the right, he's the past president of the State Board of Education, the co-founder of Cornerstone Schools, and the Republican candidate for U.S. Senate, Durant is here. And a true Renaissance man, retired physician, past president of the Detroit School Board, talk show host, current state rep from Detroit, Dr. Jimmy Womack. And of course, we've all met Charlie, so let's get started right here. Reverend, you have opposed each other on many issues, and yet you are here together now on the issue of charter schools.
Sure.
Why?
Well, I mean, I think that educating kids is the most important thing we can work on. I want to say from the very beginning, the information is startling. 70% of the kids who are in charter schools in Detroit public schools make AYP, only 33% in Detroit public schools. That's why all of our high schools will be in a recovery district next year. They score 15% higher on the MEP score. So I want to dispel right away that charter schools underperform public schools in Detroit. That's absolutely not true. And there ought to be schools available for these kids whose parents want them to have a better education and have choice. So that's why I'm in favor of lifting the cap.
Okay, well, we've got some information from the State Board of Education. That's correct. And apparently charter schools don't always perform better than public schools. According to a 2010 report by the State Department of Education, 76% of charter students were proficient in math on the MEP test. That compares to 84% for students who attended traditional public schools. In reading, the pass rate was 78% for charter students, 86% for those who attended public school. And Durant, you happen to be the co-founder of a charter school system that works, Cornerstone Schools. But as we see, according to this report, it doesn't work for every student.
Well, here's what really works, though, Huel. You've got to give kids and parents a choice to find the learning environment that's important for them. All kids can learn, but they learn differently, and you've got to give them that option. The best test of whether a charter school is working or not, do the kids stay there, do they show up there, and do they have waiting lists? Most charter schools have waiting lists. Now, if good work wasn't being done, waiting lists wouldn't exist. So we need more options for more kids, not just in Detroit, but across Michigan. Right. And if we're going to develop human capital, we have to get away from this government system of monopoly schools. The world is going in a different direction, and Michigan has to too.
Dr. Jimmy Womack, you once ran the Detroit public school system as president of the school board. Are charter schools the answer? Is an increase, unlimited number of charter schools the answer to educating our kids?
I also sat on the Council of Great City Schools, a national organization in the Michigan Association of School Boards. If you disaggregate the data for 2010 to 2011 from the Michigan Department of Education, you will find that about 70% of charter schools are in the lowest 50th percentile in terms of academic performance. In addition to that, there must be an expectation of learning. I support alternative education where there's an expectation of learning. I think about 80% of the current charter schools have outside management companies for profit. Now, in terms of changing the model of education, currently by law, it's the state's responsibility to educate all children. Now, if you're going to privatize education, should it really be off of tax dollars? That's a debate we should have.
Well, let's be clear. Are any of your schools for profit?
No, we're not. Okay. But let me just say, you know what I have a
Okay.
basic problem with? What's good for the goose is good for the gander. MEA, Jimmy Womack, and all the people talk about how charter schools don't perform. The data I gave you is real for schools in Detroit. But the Detroit public schools have failed for years. There are schools that have not made AYP in years. In fact, a recovery district was created. All of our high schools, there'll be 2 high schools left in Detroit public schools, Cass and Renaissance, because the other ones all failed.
When you say AYP, what are you talking about?
Annual yearly progress.
Okay, all right.
I mean, no one's up in arms about that. I mean, no one's saying let's do something different with those schools. Those kids have perpetually been behind, and no one's been concerned about it. The only time they get concerned is if the schools close because people don't have access to other areas of the city or whatever. But there are kids, I mean, hundreds, thousands of kids who want to to go to charter schools, and we ought to give them an opportunity.
But the problem with your ideas, according to some critics, is that if you open up the process to everyone, you can have some bad people in it. You can have some bad programs that will also allow bad schools to be created out of the charter system.
We've had bad programs, even with good people, for a long time in an existing monopoly. We know monopolies don't deliver quality over time. Will there be bad performers in some of the charter schools? Absolutely. But you know something? It's much easier to close a bad charter school than it is to close a bad traditional public school.
That's right.
If you want to give kids the chance to be great, then give them the ability to make choices to find great schools and great teachers. And frankly, we ought to be looking at virtual schools. We ought to be looking at all sorts of ways to accelerate learning, to allow kids to move at their pace. Whether it's a fast pace, a medium pace, it's their pace.
But you all agree there should be one standard for all schools, whether public, private,
no
or
question.
charter.
Sure. I'm in agreement, and Clark and I are in agreement that there ought to be some kind of standard for charter schools. No one's suggesting that they have a different skewed way of judging those in public schools. But I want to say again, I've been a prime supporter of Detroit Public Schools, former elected member of the Board of Education, run a contract school for DPS. I will always support DPS, but these kids need choice. It's a difference between their future and failing for the rest of their lives.
We will be following this issue. Gentlemen, we thank you for your comments and your insights. Still to come on Let It Rip, more and more people are hosting holiday parties at home. But should you be held liable if your guests get out of control? Time to take the show on the road when Let It Rip rolls right along.